6:03, I call the Public Works Committee meeting to open. Roll call.
Mr. Hellinger,
Here.
Vice Chairman Browning,
Here.
Chairman Jones.
Motion to excuse Mr. Jones.
Second.
There you go. I don't think we need a roll since we.
I'm gonna vote yes.
I think so, yeah.
Just do all in favor. we're
All
good.
right. All in favor?
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Approval of the motion summary for the meeting, Public Works Public Utilities Committee, meeting on May 7th, 2019, as recorded and transcribed.
Move to approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Public comment.
It's unanimous. I think we should reserve 15 minutes for public comment.
Quick, Jim.
Anyway, next. Bill, honorary street naming.
All right,
What do you got?
thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Yeah, what I want to do is bring forth before you an issue that's going to come up for our next council meeting, and just vet it a little bit through this department. It does involve infrastructure. Assistant City Manager Kreidler and I have been working on this, and this really originated somewhat out of the most recent request several weeks ago for another honorary street sign named after Mr. Elmer W.B. Curry. And then we have additional request for Rutherford B. Hayes. So what we don't have in town currently is any policy regarding how do we do this, and could this be Pandora's box if we start naming these things and get more requests? So we put our heads together, wrote some fairly simplistic guidelines, guidance policy to help establish what criteria, and that's what was really included. I think you have that in the packet, had a chance to read it. There've been some minor changes to it. One of the things that was changed was to consider these things 10 years or more posthumously.
Yeah.
So to avoid the
That's
emotional
Yeah,
reaction
emotional reaction,
when
yeah.
something happens.
Thank you.
And we also just simplified the cost section to simply say, we can do a simplistic sign in-house, but if it involves custom graphics, that the applicant would be responsible for paying the cost of having that custom sign made. So what we've put together up here are some pretty simple examples. The exact language is still to be determined. We want to work with the applicants on whether they want the full W.B. Curry or Elmer W.B. Curry way. So we got a couple different examples what that could look like. And then we're showing basically black on white, white on brown. For those a couple examples, then with the Rutherford B. Hayes, a number of both simple and more complex examples. The American flag on the middle two and the bottom has the presidential seal on it, which we're actually vetting through congressional office right now to see if that's even permitted to do a presidential seal. So the reason I show that is to give you a variety of what these things could look like. We're trying not to be too specific exactly, other than saying there's certain materials we don't want them to be. For example, a blue background is reserved for city signs. Green background signs are really reserved for our county round. We don't want to create confusion as to ownership of the street. And then things like orange we should really reserve for construction, not to create confusion. Outside of that, we're showing things that are generally fairly easy to manufacture. I know we have some different colored ones in town, but it gives you an idea of what we can do graphically. We like to limit it in the policy to 36 inches wide because that's what we can safely mount, cantilever it off of a post without it swaying in the wind too much or breaking off the bracket or hanging it overhead. So that's just some of the simple rules we have here. Really the real nutshell is the qualification section in here to make sure that there really is some local tie and national, statewide historic significance to this person. Just to give you some guidance, and ultimately the process requires it to be vetted through council and approved by resolution. So at the next council meeting following Monday, there'll be this policy, assuming that you're in favor of promoting it and advancing to that, along with a resolution for both the W.B. Curry request and the Rutherford B. Hayes request. And those will be handled as a separate resolution. So I can answer questions at this point.
So is the intent then that all of these honorary signs, what are we calling these? Are they honorary
The
signs?
honorary street naming. It's
Okay.
honorary street naming,
Okay.
and
So
because
these honorary street signs, is the intent then that they will once that format is defined, whichever one is chosen, then everything will adhere to that?
Not necessarily, and
Oh,
that's
that
why we
would
showed
suck.
you variety. You could choose to say, it only looks this way. I should let, Mr. Kreidler speak, because in Dublin, he was there when a similar policy was adopted, and I believe they do have more of a, I think, more specific details of that signs all look similar. Where we are saying that we have a variety of graphics.
Yeah.
We tried to limit it to a few colors that are permissible, but we didn't get as specific as saying it can only look like the third one down or the sixth one.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like the white on brown. I mean, that just makes sense, because that's what your point of interest signs are throughout the state for everything. And it's like,
Right.
State parks, that sort of thing.
yeah.
Historic sites.
Yeah, historic sites, all that type of stuff. But, I mean, I'm glad that we're putting this together, but the first thing that came to mind when I saw this bill was, you know, I wish we had this in place when Joe died, because I think that was, anyways, I think that was handled poorly, because, and again, to your point, it's all very emotional, and then everybody wants, the next thing you know, you have a corporate jet named after somebody. So, if this were to get passed, is then the intent that, heaven forbid, you know, we have a terrorist attack here and everybody dies in City Hall, that this would be in place and would handle all of those forward things, and would it then negate renaming of a street for a specific person?
So a couple different questions there.
Yeah.
Let's start with the first one. Once it's in place, we're proposing to, first of all, do it as a resolution. So it's not as strict, and doesn't become codified like an ordinance. So it gives you
Right.
the flexibility to change this in the future if you need to change it. But once we do adopt, first you adopt the policy, and then we start considering the request and all future requests. So it does give you the guidance document in place to make those decisions, engage them against in the future. So that's the benefit from it. If there was a rename, we're not renaming streets, this is in a
I
sense an
know, it's a-
auxiliary name, it's an honorary name. It needs to be mounted adjacent to, above or beside the existing street sign, so there's not confusion for motorists coming through town,
Right.
wondering what road they're on. So the road name itself is not being renamed, because that's far more difficult to do. So it's purely just to add the honorarium to that segment of street, as in these cases, Mr. Curry or President Hayes. If that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it does. It's not the answer I wanted to hear, but
Yeah.
it is that answer. I just think I think we need to somehow restrict.
Mm.
I don't think we should be renaming roads for anybody. If it's a new road, that's fine. I'm gonna name it after, you know.
Well, the one section of
Whatever,
language, you can strengthen it. I researched a bit, some other communities in the country, and then we had what Kyle brought.
Mm-hmm.
And the language is somewhat similar, but we do we can strengthen it, but it talks about achievement, lifetime achievement for local, state, national notoriety for their individual contribution to arts, music, education, government leadership, and so on. So it does kind of set the stage of looking for someone who's extremely has the notoriety at a very high level. So it can't just be, we really liked this person, they were part of the community, and then they passed away, so why don't we name something after them?
Yeah,
Exactly. Because it's really for someone who's achieved a higher level of notoriety. But ultimately, that decision lands back at council, because that's how we've written, that it's presented to council and subject to public hearing. And public hearing, not public hearing, a formal public hearing, but you discuss it publicly.
So what would be what's the feedback on if you had multiple formats, colors and what have you?
Mhm.
I mean, what does that, to me, that just sounds like visual clutter.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, and we don't really like that, but the proposals came in. We have Pacer Way right now, which is
Mhm.
black on orange. We have Branch Rickey, which is black on that deep cardinal red, kind of hard to read.
Yeah.
DeGenova Way is an actual road
Road,
name,
yeah.
not an honorary name.
Right.
So, but we've already kind of set the pace for do what you want to do, but we've addressed this issue kind of loosely earlier this year when we had a request for doing sidewalks differently and painting them and making them to artworks. And we said, no, we can't do that because everything is designed for the motorist. It's supposed to be simple, easy to read. And so this is it's a little grayer in that, is this for the motorist? Well, no, it's auxiliary to the road sign, but it does present visual information that you're trying to gain as a motorist. So we don't want it too cluttered. We can do it. I don't know if Kyle, you want to talk about logic at
Well,
Dublin?
I know Dublin is very strict about eye pollution, I guess you could say, or
Yeah.
sign clutter. And they went through actually another, and I see it here in Delaware, there's the wayfinding in the downtown. They all have the similar look. And I believe with the honorary street naming, it's just one, you only get one version or
Right.
one thing. So I'm just wondering, it sounds like we only have like 3 or 4. If we do choose one,
Please.
then just go back and just do them all like
Yeah.
that. And then that is the template moving forward. And then it's just less variety. When you're driving around, it doesn't.
And we could do, I think Dublin's is like 1, 2, 3, the fourth one down, where it says president, I think it says honorary,
Yes.
and then it has the name below it. I think that's what
Yeah.
Dublin's.
Yep, and they also, just not to add further complication, but let's say for the Memorial Tournament, they will rename Bridge and High, which is like their main downtown crosshairs, for I think whoever that honorary golfer is that week. But they only put it up for that week. It's honorary Payne Stewart Way, then they take it down. But then there's the more permanent honorary, like let's say a Dave Thomas Way, but it is the same template throughout the city. But they only have, there's not a ton of them, to be honest with you.
So I was gonna ask that the honorary, does it go up forever? Or are we talking windows of time?
Some have windows of time, some are permanent. Once it's up there, it's honorary forever. So we didn't put a time limit on it.
What's your thought on the differentiation? I mean, if it has to be this high level of notoriety and you've achieved all this, why then would for somebody it would be like, oh, well, it's 10 years and now everybody's forgot about this guy. Because if they have that notoriety, you would think it would be permanent.
That was my reasoning,
Mhm.
that not to, I was reading, I think it was Boulder, Colorado, their policy said 10 years and you review it, and I'm like, that's just a lot of government process.
Yeah.
To do something we already went through to establish that notoriety is there, why not just keep it in place?
Yeah.
So unless there was, for example, the Dublin situation where there's an event coming in, maybe we had a special event here that's gonna be something, the World's Fair is gonna be in Delaware one summer. So we wanna rename Sandusky Street World's Fair Drive for the summer.
Mhm.
You could do that under the policy, you could put a constraint on it if you wanted to. But in general, I think once we're establishing a section to be honorary, it's there in perpetuity.
Okay.
Perpetuity.
The only reason I ask about the time is that the Curry Way came up from the Historical Society,
Mhm.
is that right?
Mhm.
I think, and, I guess when I compare Rutherford B. Hayes with Mr. Curry, everyone knows Rutherford B. Hayes,
Mhm.
not Mr. Curry generally, even though Mr. Curry's done, you look at his resume, it's pretty impressive. But it's not President of the United States either.
Right.
So.
Well, and I think that's part of why you get to review this, and as you may say, every time one of these comes before us, we want the applicant to come in there and kind of give the bio and let us, or pre-give the bio, so we can research ourselves a bit and see if it does, arrive. Once you set that mold of anybody you accept, you've kind of set that baseline.
Yep.
And people will always push a baseline, a little bit further down, so, yeah, you do, I understand the concern there. And I agree that apparently for the bio that we have is that he was a man of, very achieved man nationally, that I never knew anything about. So, but you always have the ability as council to interview, ask for information and to make that decision.
I think I like the one design, you know, whatever it is, pick it. Perhaps put a big Delaware D on the front of it, you know, to recognize Delaware, but I'm kind of, I'd be fine with, what, 1, 2, 3, 4 down. I think
Mhm.
that's, the Dublin method, I think probably, you know, honorary.
Well,
great.
that's, I think that's why in Dublin it said present there, it would say honorary, because then you know exactly what you're looking at.
Yeah.
It's an
Mhm.
honorary sign,
Yeah.
and, you know, for Branch Rickey could be the same way, honorary
Exactly.
Branch Rickey way.
Yeah.
So, that would work, and there's, you know, and I guess in my opinion, Branch Rickey way, maybe it's nice or a little gimmicky that the sign is black and cardinal red, but we have black and cardinal red all over campus with flags and everything
Yeah.
else, that, I'm not sure the sign has to be that way too.
Right.
And that's probably the one that's the most difficult to read.
Yep.
So, we're presenting this tonight, and really, because, unless you have objection, what we could do is, you could suggest we modify the policy for us, the council, to have it be monochromatic for all signs. That it be, we could put that in here. That discussion could also be held at council level. I won't be here next Monday, but Kyle will be here.
Mhm.
Kind of some continuity in the discussion. And, I guess tonight would be probably appropriate to have a motion supporting the development of policy for honorary street naming signs, and then presentation at full council for further discussion.
Okay, I guess I can make that motion that we, move forward with the, policy development for honorary street naming, and, that we go ahead and present that as a resolution to council for their consideration.
Seconds. Roll
Aye.
call. Aye. All right.
Okay, thank you.
It's a hard day.
Mr. Bill, cluster mailbox guidelines.
Yeah, this is really just an update. I don't want council or the community to be caught off guard by something that has come at us at the request of the United States Postal Service, and that is that they no longer are supporting individual placement of mailboxes per single-family residential home. They want cluster mailboxes in residential communities, just like they do in multifamily communities. So there's some examples. That one's a little small, but the other ones, I just wanted to show you some examples of what these are gonna look like. That's probably more typical to what we might see in a neighborhood, or something very similar to that. So we're talking about Terra Alta neighborhood on the east side is already putting in the cluster mailboxes. And so this isn't something that we're voting on necessarily, as much as we're trying to make you aware. We have been dealing with the postmaster for the state, not even just local. And so this is more of a state mandated. Many of our counterparts in Central Ohio are having the same discussions. So there's kind of things that, now, we do have policy, and that our policy is a technical guidance document
Mhm.
that we're trying to develop to give to the consultants, so they have some idea where we want these to be positioned within our neighborhoods. For example, not behind a fire hydrant, not next to someone's driveway, not within 50 feet of an intersection. Things like that, opposite side of the street from certain things, not underneath or in the way of our streetlights. So that's the technical guidance policy we're trying to put together. The other half of it is the aesthetics. Do we want them to have a certain aesthetic? Do we want the development to allow they have the aesthetics? That conversation is probably best led by planning director at the council level, if we want to actually dictate the aesthetics at a uniform standard throughout the community, or do we want to let the individual developments dictate their mailbox standard as they do today in different areas?
Is this a mandate, or is this a?
It's a mandate from the post office.
Effective when?
Actually effective now. They're asking us to do the transition now, and they've already indicated that Terra Alta, which is our newest development, they will not be delivering mail to single-family mailboxes.
Is there any more information behind that mandate from a standpoint of, are they looking to retrofit this at some point?
No, their indication was no. They're not gonna go back to existing neighborhoods and take out single-family mailboxes. Doesn't mean 5 years from now.
Yeah,
They wouldn't do
everything's
that.
open to change. So then, my question is, and there's, who owns these?
They'd be owned by a HOA.
Don't have a name.
Yeah.
Where we live, we have no HOA.
Yeah.
Who owns them? Yeah, if there's no HOA,
Yep, there
who
would-
buys them, who maintains them?
There would have to be an entity put together in that development to manage certain community properties, of which the mailboxes would be community property as well as the piece of land that they're on. Some of the guidance we're looking at is trying to establish these if there's a park, along the park frontage, so it's not in front of necessarily someone's home. So this is a work in progress, but it's gotten so far as some of these are going in, which is why, again, I wanted to make this body aware of it. So if there's concerns, we wanna incorporate into our thinking, and as we further advance this policy and this discussion, that we can start to incorporate those things.
Yeah, I mean, when I looked over the packet and reviewed this, yeah, I mean, all the technical considerations
Right.
about where it can be and where it shouldn't be and all this, all look good. I was just kind of taken back by this whole mandate.
Yep.
And again, who owns it? So, I mean, it just sounds like this is a giant cluster. I mean, it is a cluster, but I mean, it's a bigger cluster than this.
We've had a lot of the same concerns, and again, Dave Eflin is kind of heading up the zoning side of this, of how do these fit into neighborhoods? How do we get them onto properties that can be controlled? They're not on someone's private property. Do we want them on public property? What happens if a car wipes them out? Who fixes it, replaces it?
Yep.
There's all these questions to it that we're still, because we don't have this type of policy in place for private properties, for single-family properties, we've got to develop our thinking and our guidance on this.
Yeah.
So, those are good questions that you're bringing up. So I don't, at this point, it's really to make you very aware of something that is happening, and if there is input you want us to consider. I think at some point, we're gonna have to present this. We could present this to full council, because I think everyone should know about it, and our standards are more gonna be technical standards. I think we'll
Yeah.
just incorporate into our technical design guide, which we don't really need council action on. But I wasn't comfortable this issue moving forward without council being aware that, by the way, guess what, we don't mailboxes anymore.
Yeah, that's
And,
just crazy.
You know, and that, to me, it's kind of a change fundamentally in how you do something around your property and in your neighborhood.
USPS racing to the bottom.
It's not the first mandate we've been subject to. The other one was the power company, AEP, mandating that we can no longer have single energized light poles anymore. They have to be through a metered supply. So a group or a whole neighborhood or half neighborhood is on a meter, and that's not how we've been traditionally doing these things. So that's why we had to develop policy now on how do we put street lights in. It fundamentally changed our infrastructure backbone in order to be able to do this. So AEP started it with that, and they came in and just told us the same way. We said, well, is this a slow rollout? Do we have time? They said, no, from this point on, we're not approving electric lighting layouts until you master meter them. So now we're getting the same thing with the post office. It came as somewhat of a surprise to us. We've been working on it for probably about 4 to 6 months or so, and we're at the point now where they're actually going in, and we
Has this been in front of planning, the planning commission?
I don't wanna say yes or no,
Okay.
because I don't know, and I don't know if you know from any of the agendas,
I haven't,
not that you remember.
mm,
Yeah, I don't think it has, and I was encouraging Dave to probably have a similar conversation with the planning commission too, to let them know this is somewhat of a characteristic change
Yeah, very
to how
much
business
so.
is done
Very much so.
regarding mail.
If we owned the boxes, would that give us any distribution advantage, you know, if we wanted to give everyone a flyer for a council meeting or something? I don't know.
Or prevent certain things from using them, like ad bags or things like that, or.
Yeah, I'm just
That's a legal question, maybe. I don't.
Yeah.
I think even if we own the mailbox, though, it is a mailbox protected under all federal, you can't tamper
Yeah.
with, et
Yeah.
cetera, et cetera.
Cause then you get in the box.
It's
Yeah.
a whole, it's just
Yeah.
it's a.
Yeah, it's
myriad
a
of issues.
huge mess.
It really is, but the fact is that it works fine with apartment communities, they do cluster mailboxes, and it seems to work. Packages get delivered, but the more and more, I know Amazon Prime is on my little cul-de-sac a couple times a day now.
Mm-hmm.
So in the Christmas time, I mean, I can't imagine like the 2 or so package boxes ever being sufficient for the amount of delivery. So that was somewhat of a concern that, you know, but it's here, so we wanna make sure if there's a front end to be on it, if we wanna have guidance, we can incorporate it, just like small cell tower policy we
Mhm.
worked on, and on the lighting with AEP. The times are changing and we're trying to react appropriately.
Yeah.
That was the report on that.
Wow.
Alright, resurfacing,
Yes.
2020.
I'm gonna just pass these down here.
These are all the same, right?
Those are all the same. Got one for
Oh,
Kyle
that was
here.
awesome.
Almost made it.
Almost died.
Three, you got one on top right there.
Yes,
Two
sir.
more there.
Another couple more?
2, 3.
Alright.
All right, this is really a update, but I know this is a topic of interest.
Yes.
So I handed out 3 different exhibits. I think you had in the packet, but these have been
Yep.
updated slightly. The first one I just wanted to talk about, the funding strategy. This is, the first section is really just a review of the funding sources that we do allocate towards our resurfacing program. The top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are existing funding sources that we've traditionally allocated towards it. The second from bottom, state gas tax increase, you see the 775 is the average amount of additional gas tax funding over the next 5 years that we're allocating towards resurfacing. And then the permissive license fee increase, that's the average of about 100,000 over the next 5 years per year that we could receive with the additional $5 permissive tax increase.
Okay.
So I wanted to draw attention to the top on gas tax. That's our existing allocation. We don't only receive $90,000. $90,000 of our gas tax is allocated towards resurfacing. The majority of it goes straight to the street maintenance repair fund, which supports all of the public works, street operations, signals and things. So about just a little over $2 million a year that's without adding general fund contributions into there, is what our program we're planning on for the next 5 years. The expenditures, the next section below, it just breaks up to what we call our OPWC streets, which are those applications we do every year, just under $1 million worth of work a year. Our development block grant streets, we really work this program every other year, but it averages out to $75,000 per year. Local streets now, we're showing a $900,000 a year program. We were at 150, if you recall, in the last budgets. Add this 775, and we're about $900,000. And it's setting aside $100,000 a year of revenue a year to take care of our urban resurfacing match when that comes up. We will be doing an urban resurfacing program next year on 37, or base repairs on our state routes and US routes. That number also coincides with, we're about 13.5% of our total square footage of road that we maintain is state route and US route, subject to state funding at the 80-20 split. So the $100,000 a year works out nicely as to, that does cover our 13% requirement. And then our inspection and engineering administrative costs. So you see we're pretty well balanced out our revenues and what our expenditures could be. And then the bottom section, we always ask, well, what should we be spending? And I've tried to show this in as simplistic a way as possible, breaking down into the 4 main categories of roads we have, the miles of each, how often we should resurface them, which means, well, how many miles a year should we be doing? So to use local streets, for example, on the bottom, we have 91 miles of local streets. They should be resurfaced every 25 to 35 years, depending upon the quality of the road and what treatment we're doing. So that's 2.6 to 3.6 miles per year of local streets we should be resurfacing. And the cost, based on current costs, would be about $1.4 to $2 million So when you add up all that, we're at about $2.9 to $4 million program. 2.9 million if everything was a perfect world, lasted as long as possible. 4 million if they fall apart sooner than we like. So that just gives a summary of where we'd like to be. So you contrast that with the available revenues in the top at $2 million. So you can see we're $1 million to $2 million out of balance still. But we can say we're $1 million better with the programs that we've able to have. So it gets us, we're not stopping the decline in our pavement condition, but we're certainly slowing it down by having some significant revenue to put towards our local streets.
Okay.
So the next page, which is the other, it says 5-year arterial collector resurfacing program. This just summarizes the large roads over the next 5 years that we'll be working on to get Public Works Commission grant funding and community development block grant funding for. So you can see in 2020, we're looking at Bell Avenue to receive funding for, and then West William Street, all of the base repairs that need to occur on West William Street, all the holes are, applying for funds for that. And then you're seeing our urban resurfacing match dollars over there on the right too. So a total about $1.2 million of work in 2020. And on so as you read down.
So these are, reflect grant programs versus the 2 million we're gonna have in income. So it's really, this is the
It's
2
part
million.
of this.
Gotcha.
Really, if you go to the second section on that, Jim, you'll see the grant program, OPW streets is $950,000.
Gotcha.
Again, the urban resurfacing is $100,000.
Gotcha. Okay.
So,
Cool, thanks.
okay. So those are, so you can look at and ask questions on, but we're putting together our submission right now for the Bell Avenue work. I believe you already passed the resolution earlier this summer for that. So the large sheet, these are local streets, mostly local and local collector streets. For example, a road like Hawthorne, actually Hawthorne's on here, so it's a bad example. But there's some large streets on here, like Boulder Drive's a fairly significant street, but it's on here as a local street too. These are streets based on our most recent 2018 pavement evaluations. And at the opinion of the engineer, we're in need of resurfacing now as a poor street, or very poor, meaning they failed, they're even beyond that point. So this is a total list, and at the very bottom of the page, if you flip, you can see that's just shy, 19.77 miles, or just shy of 20 miles of street that currently need to be resurfaced. So as you look to the right, the blue column, where there's a dollar amount figured in, those are the streets in 2020 that will be resurfaced. And the way this is broken up, if you look at the second row, it says northwest, central, north, south, east, and west. We've tried to break the city up into sections in order that our paving contractor can stay in a section and get the biggest value. So he can drive his equipment back and forth from street to street and not have to mobilize, and demobilize. So that saves money and makes the job more efficient. So the Northwest District, which is probably where we have the majority of documented complaints on road condition, is the area that would be targeted for 2020. We'll be putting those plans together this fall, trying to bid that work out in January, and actually start that work as early as late April, early May. Then, as you can just see, we move on to 21 all the way through 24, and you can pick the streets out. What you will notice is not all streets are included in the 5 years. So the third row across, you see the numbers in 2020 is 963, 571. That's just our projection of what the total cost of all that resurfacing could be. It might be a little higher, it might be a little bit lower, but that's just our guess. So you're seeing we're looking at bidding about $950,000, $960,000 of work per year over the next 5 years for local streets. And again, not all streets are included at the funding we have. We can't get all the streets done. On the bottom, the very bottom, you'll see a row called total miles. Each year you're seeing we're 2.6 miles of road per year, 2.5, 2.5, and so on. So in total, you're looking at a little bit over 12 and a half miles or so of streets that will be paved in 5 years, of the just 20 miles of streets that already need to be paved.
Yeah.
So we're cutting into it, but we're not eliminating the issue. So that's really the purpose of this. It's really just to give you an idea of how We're going to start spending the money that's coming in. We're really putting all the new gas tax money and potentially the additional license registration money into our local streets, which is something we were said would be doing if we get more revenue. So it gives you a snapshot of what our planning process is.
So do you have a projection, a 10-year projection? Okay, so if we do, if this plan comes together, then looking 10 years out, I mean, are we making progress? Is then our crap list of streets down to maybe 15 miles due
Right.
to continued degradation? I mean, have we been able to identify that, kind of graph that out based on this to know when we actually get to that kind of break-even point, for lack of a better word?
Not with the kind of specificity we wish we could.
Okay.
That would be able to predict when a road that we think is good is gonna become bad. We know all pavement degrades over time. And we do know that based on the square footage of roads that need to be paved each year for the past 20 years, that amount has continued to increase. Or you could inversely, the conditions of our roads are getting worse every year. What this does is it says we'll be able to do about 12.5 miles, or maybe about 60% or so, 65% of all of our bad pavements we can address in the next 5 years. On this program, what it doesn't tell you is, well, how many pavements that are good
Are
will
going
become
bad.
bad pavements.
Yeah, exactly.
In that same time frame. It won't be an equal amount for sure, but the more roads we build, we have this big base of roads we built since the early 90s and 2000s that are all becoming 20 and 25-year-old roads. So yes, every year that we do evaluate, we're gonna add up, we might be adding another dozen streets into that list. So that's why I'm saying is the money we have will help slow down, but that's why I provided this information in the very first sheet.
Yeah.
On the bottom, it says that if you want your roads to last,
Yeah.
if all local streets could last 35 years before you pave them, you only need to pave 2.5 miles of road per year. That's what this program gets us, 2.5 miles per year. But we know our local streets aren't lasting 35 years before they need to be paved. It's more like 25 years. That means we should be doing at least 3.5 miles of local street per year to break even on our local streets. That doesn't include the collector streets. So together, our local and collector, which makes up our neighborhood streets, we should really be paving somewhere between 4 to 5.5 miles per year of street. And we're at 2.5 miles. So I can tell you that overall, we're still gonna degrade in the overall condition of our streets.
So what can the city do to move more towards, let's say, new development, making certain those streets last 35 years? Can we change our engineering specs?
Yeah.
Can we require different materials? What can we do to move that needle to get more longevity out of assets that a developer's creating and then shoving into our face to maintain?
That's a really good question. And I'll answer by saying what we did. When I first came here in '95, we had a very bad pavement section. We were putting 3 inches of asphalt on top of 4 to 6 inches of gravel. And that was our road. Those are a lot of those roads in Lexington Glen now, Providence, Bridgeport, Avon, that are falling apart. We changed that to a minimum of 12-inch pavement section or 15-inch pavement section, with a minimum of 6 to 8 inches of asphalt on top. So those roads are gonna last a lot longer than your traditional 20 to 25 years, because we did make that change almost 20 years ago. We also do additional treatments when they're first installed to try to improve the resiliency of the pavement. So we're doing all the right things now to get the longest wear out of the roads we can. What we are paying the price on is for the roads that were built up through the 80s into the early to mid 90s that didn't have a very good pavement section.
Yeah.
And
So
that's
we're-
the majority of our bad roads now.
So we're paying for the sins of our fathers.
Yeah, yes.
Is really what it comes
But we did
down
make
to.
some really good, updates to our pavement section, and now we've really bolstered our crack sealing program to make sure we're getting out there and getting to all of our neighborhoods and doing a lot of crack sealing operations, which kind of makes your road look bad to see all the black squiggly lines on it, but it protects that pavement. So we're doing more maintenance in-house with our operations to try to preserve that top course of pavement, which in itself helps the longevity of the entire pavement section. So we're doing the right things as a community now, but we're still trying to catch up for what was kind of substandard pavement construction.
So for, let's say that those substandard construction, when those come up for repavement, are we addressing those issues, or are we just putting a Band-Aid over top and saying,
No.
okay, here's that course, and now it's gonna last 20 years and it's gonna fall apart again?
Another
because of-
really good question. Cambridge is a great example. Last year, we had to repave Cambridge. It was one of those streets that was built, in my opinion, substandard. There wasn't, because the condition got so bad on top, there was nothing left of the asphalt worth preserving. So we had to take all the asphalt off and replace it with a deeper asphalt section. So not only did we erase all the bad, but we also improved the pavement section too. But in a sense, we almost had to rebuild the road. So I had a, typically, we're spending about $2.40 or so, $2.50 a square foot to pave a road. That road costs $5 a square foot. But we built it to a section now that we should get very solid longevity out of.
Gotcha.
And that road was just built in '95, and Cambridge, and it was falling apart by 2015 in just 20 years. So we got to look at each road and say, is there something worth, for example, a lot of the streets next year, Albemarle, Bridgeport, Providence, are all these roads under the old standard, they're all in different conditions. We can't rebuild every road.
Right.
But there's new techniques out there that can even help us preserve what's I don't want to say a crumbling road, but a road with some real deficiencies. There's some things we can do to still get some value out of it and put a new course on top and get some good life out of it. All really good questions. So this is the direction we're going. The intent isn't to bring every slate of streets before this body and council and ask permission. We just want to be aggressive. We want to spend the money and get out in the community and pave some streets.
There you go.
All right, thanks, Bill.
That's all I have on that.
All right,
Next
review
one.
item 7, review of ODOT safety fund
Yeah,
applications.
this is just an update. Those are our two top projects for ODOT, safety program funds. Safety funds are distributed twice a year, or you can do what's called an out-of-cycle request for a very small project. The median closure or partial closure at Hull Drive and 23 is something that's already within ODOT's US 23 Access Management Plan, and in there it talks about future closure or partial closure. We met with ODOT. They're supportive of advancing that element of their plan now, especially in light of the recent fatality we had there.
Mm-hmm.
So the steps we would take would be we could work a abbreviated safety study, return on investment analysis, submit that to the state, and ask for $250,000 to $300,000, which is sufficient to make changes in the median, which would really prohibit left turns out from East or West Hull Drive. It wouldn't prohibit left turns off of 23 onto those side streets, which are not the problematic movement. The
Yeah.
problematic movements are people shooting across the highway or taking lefts across the highway.
Gotcha.
So that's the first project, and we think that's a fairly important one to move forward on. The second one is East Central Avenue. We feel there's some more safety funds on the table to help us with East Central. Anytime you have daily congestion and a lot of queuing, you have a higher percentage of rear end collisions, and that helps drive up the safety issue and makes your project more valuable for safety funding. So we would like to start the federal funding need we're gonna have in that road to able to advance an improvement. We need federal dollars, state dollars. So kind of the low hanging fruit is get a safety application in and see if we can get the funds in to start us through the planning process, which would help us in the what's the actual cost, where would we widen, how do we fix the Lake Street intersection, what kind of pavement are we looking at, and get through that planning phase, the design phase, and then at the same time, this is very similar to William Street and the Point, we start going after larger funding sources like MORPC Surface Transportation Program funds to pay for the bulk of the construction. So these two projects entering the whole federal funding scheme through the safety program is a good entrance point, and we've been successful in the past with safety fund applications.
Is there a way that, I mean, when you look at that intersection, you know, the worst part of that is that southwest corner where that always never open defunct pizza place
Oh,
was
yeah.
most recently.
Yeah,
You know, because it's right there on the street, I mean, it's just all kinds of bad. Is there any realistic potential for something to be done where maybe that property was somehow acquired and removed? Because I can't see where that intersection will ever be worth squat as long as that building's there.
right. The process, the federal process, requires us to build the improvement that is the best improvement for the intersection. And part of that is right-of-way evaluation, right-of-way identification, right-of-way acquisition. And in order to really improve that intersection and improve that radius,
Mm-hmm.
likely you'd see, the acquisition of that property included with it as part of the northwest property as well. Because it also,
Mm-hmm.
is, the trucks that come from 42 and turn down to get 23 have difficulty making that. It's just very narrow in there, and it wasn't set up for the traffic. So acquisition would be part of it, and it would just, it would follow the federal process that would be justified by the project. And then it'd be fairly evaluated based on market conditions, and a fair offer would be made to the property owners at that point. And we went through that process on East William Street. We didn't need any large properties. But in this case, the intersection, we may need, some significant property to make the improvements we need to make through there. So that'd be part of the process.
And the idea is that then, if this project, if this intersection improvement project, as it moves forward, what is its timeline?
It'd be just like any other federal project that when we apply for safety funds, they're available fairly immediately. Let's get a jump start on the planning, the scoping, the purpose and need, design, environmental analysis. But then, to get to the construction dollars, the big chunky money, that stuff is usually out 5 years or 6 years. But if, let's say for example, we knew we were gonna get $5 million for this project in 2027, and we were ready in 2023 to do it. We could say that, well, that money's coming then, we could span the gap with a state infrastructure bank loan, borrow the money, go ahead and build the project, knowing, and then make the payments, knowing we're gonna get reimbursed in 2027. Without
Yeah.
it. So there is a process, you can still advance the construction. Typically, it's 5 to 7 years on a project that involves state and federal dollars from the time you are first awarded to when you can actually cut the ribbon on a project.
So as we've looked on council to go forward, and, you know, we've discussed about that whole rebuild of Central
Mhm.
out there, East Central, and, you know, obviously the point,
Yes.
version 2.0 brings Central back through there. But this would be its own separate project, which it would stand on its own, separate and unique from any other federal safety project that may evolve as
Mhm.
part of that
Yep, well said.
East Central plan?
Yep, I mean, we talk about our 3 big projects on the east side. One's under construction, one's under design, and one is in this early planning stage. But they have independent merit to be funded, but they are related in that they're all east side traffic.
Yeah.
And, you can fix the point, but you're not gonna really help much westbound if you don't fix the Lake Street intersection.
Right.
So they are related, they are cousins in that they all move traffic on the east side. But we've designed them and purposely put limits on them so we could keep them independent and continue to apply for these funding sources for different projects. So no one can say, well, you've got too much for this project. Well, William Street is distinctly separate from the point is distinctly separate from East Central Avenue improvements, so we've designed it that way.
Gotcha.
But those are, in our opinion, are priority initiatives of all the things and 60-some road projects across the city we could do. If I had dollars, my recommendation is let's fix this East Central Avenue, and we do have a safety issue down there, I think, at Hull Drive in 23.
Yeah.
So those are the projects I'd be moving forward on.
Great. Thanks, Bill.
Yep, thank you.
Riverby. Blake?
Right, River by, so I'm gonna maintain the theme of updates here, which is what we've done the last 3 topics. And I only really bring it because I assume over the last 5 years, you've heard that name being thrown around. Something's happening, something's not happening, and it has gone back and forth repeatedly. But it is actually at the point where something is happening for sure. So we just had meetings with the county commissioners a couple weeks ago. I think it may have actually been upwards of 2.5 weeks ago now, and they have approved to fund this project with the HOA, with the Riverby HOA. So they will be paying us upfront all of the money the project requires, and then the HOA will be being assessed through the county auditor over 20 years on their property taxes. So I just wanted to give you a visual of how we're tying them in. We've got an existing manhole there just north of High Point Church, and so we'll just be coming down and then tying into one of their manhole locations where they currently go down and go across to their private sewer plant. And if you haven't heard, the reason this happened is a number of years ago, they were put under findings and orders from the EPA. Their plant was found to be in disarray. When it rains heavily, they flow into the river, and so they were ordered to either fix or tie into a public sewer. While they could probably fix their plant for 3/4 of the price it's gonna cost to tie in, they then have to
Maintain it.
Yes, and I think they've learned that that's not, there's a reason why everybody doesn't get into the sewer treatment process. There's a lot to upkeep a system, so really I just wanted to let you guys know this is going forward. We have the plans basically done. Engineering worked with us. Chad Green, who just left, he did a great set of plans for us, worked with us really closely. And so we're just waiting on the intergovernmental agreement between us and the county. And then we're going to send those plans off to the EPA, get a PTI, and we'll probably have this out to bid late winter for construction next season.
Oh,
So
great.
we'll get them tied in as soon as possible, but we've already missed the window for this year.
Yeah.
Especially with all the rain, all the projects got pushed back. There's probably not a contractor that would even entertain trying to pick up this work this year, even if we really pushed, so. But
Good.
if there's any questions on that?
Glad
Yep.
to hear that's moving forward and it's still flowing downhill.
Now, what's gonna happen with our existing plant, I can't fully say. The deed on the property specifically stated that in the event they aren't using that property for sewage treatment anymore, it reverts back to the estate of Mr. Chuck Adrian. If that goes back to his estate, they then have to decommission and abate the whole property. We're kind of just putting out the offer, hey, we'll take care of all of that if you give us the property. It's good land for our bike path plans. It's good mitigation property there next to the river for future city endeavors. So I'm not gonna fight for the land because that's all its value is what it would cost to clean it up. But otherwise, I'll let you know later how that property pans out.
How much acreage?
Oh, on that one, I think it's just a few acres. It's not very big.
Okay.
It's just a swath down to the river from the road. A very steep driveway. No, it's very, very sloped there at the start.
Okay.
That is all I have on that, unless you have questions.
Thank you.
Okay.
Staff comments. No. Member comments. George,
I'm spoke out.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right, let's adjourn this meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thanks for attending.
Sweet.
You have the whole-